What's going on, guys? It's the Ancient Greek here, and today is a very special day in the history of the world. This is the day Troy Total War Saga has been released, and I was super excited about this, and I can't wait to dive into what I'm going to do today. So, we're going to be starting a campaign. You can see I've already got a campaign going here with Hector. Hector is my favorite. He's my man. But I'm going to start a new campaign so I could discuss what the Bronze Age was like for the people who we consider today to be Trojans or allies of Troy. And then later I'm going to be doing another one for the Greece and all the different cultural groups of Greece, and I think I'm really going to break it down by cultural groups. So let's get into this. So, you can see with the Danaan heroes, we've got the famed Achilles, everyone knows that name, and Agamemnon, almost just as popular as Achilles, and Odysseus, and Menelaus. Pretty much those four names have echoed throughout the thousands of years since this has happened. So, I'm not going to be talking about these guys right now. I will make a video on the future about them. But first I'm going to go into the Trojans. So, Hector, Paris, Aeneas, and Sarpedon. I like how the statues turn totally bronze when you let go of them like that. That is super cool. That's an amazing touch. Like, they turn into bronze statues and they're just memories from history. That's amazing. I'm getting really emotional about this because I was super excited about this game. It was my thought that they should make a Troy game, and I'm sure it was a lot of people's thoughts. And they listened, and I'm glad they listened, and they did a phenomenal job. So, give a round of applause for Creative Assembly for that. Now, we're going to be discussing, so, like, let me click on Sarpedon first.
Integrity is all.
Yes, it is. So with the cultural groups that are going on around here, you see that we've got this name that pops up, the Lelagis, and I actually did my own research on that name, and I'm going to go through that in a separate video because it's pretty interesting. The history of Lycia is interesting in itself when it goes into the classical age, but Lelagis is very interesting how they put that name because not many people outside of people who work in the field of studying the Bronze Age history know about the Lelagis people. But actually the people who existed down here in the region of Sarpedon are the Wilusian peoples, and you can see we've got some Achaean presence here, like Triopas and Tedepolemos. They're both Achaean factions, Achaeans inhabiting Rhodes and Achaeans inhabiting this like segment peninsula of southwest Anatolia here, and the Achaeans just kind of came over and colonized, just like their famed invasion of Crete and when they defeated the Knossos civilization, the Minoan civilization. They also came over here and made a few settlements, but really the native tribes here are the Wilusians, and the interesting thing about them is they were actually one of the sea peoples who would end up later participating in those raids against Egypt and the Hittites and all the different kingdoms that existed right along the eastern Mediterranean, over by what is now Syria and Israel and Palestine and Egypt and also East Turkey. So I will be discussing these guys at great length later, and I just wanted to go through all this now in this video just to let you know that it is coming and just to give you some initial information on that. So what I'm actually going to be covering now is Hector.
I stand firm
and
for
Troy.
my city.
Yes, so do I. Troy is my city. So we see this name come out around here, the Pelasgians. Now, the Pelasgians are essentially, it's interesting because when you look them up, they're essentially known as Greeks before Greeks. I mean, Greeks before ancient Greeks. So they're known as like the people of Greece before the ancient Greeks came along. And it's very interesting that the Creative Assembly decided to place them all over here. It's like they thought that the original Greeks were all Trojans or something like that, because these are all Achaeans, and the Achaeans were eventually driven out. But there are Pelasgian populations in Greece everywhere. I mean, we're not seeing every faction in Greece. By far, we're not seeing every faction. I'm sure if you go into Agamemnon's campaign and you take a look around, you're going to see like a lot of different people, especially the Pelasgians are going to be more numerous up here. But the story goes, after the Bronze Age, the Dorians come invading down, and they basically push the Achaeans and break Achaean rule in Greece. And the Achaeans escape to a few segments that we know later. We know them to be in later, like the Achaean League. That's an obvious one. That's definitely populated by native Achaeans, and so they escape to several parts of Greece, and they make those city-states their home. And that's pretty much what happens to every group with the Dorian invasion. The Ionians end up being forced over to East Anatolia. That's why they're all over here in the classical times. And the Dorians just create city-states, most famously Sparta. But Sparta, you see here, is actually Achaean. Now, the interesting thing is that the Pelasgians are also over here, so they actually call, even Hector is Pelasgian, and Priam is Pelasgian. So all those all the people of Troy are Pelasgians. These are Aeolians. Aeolians are another Greek tribe that I'll be discussing in a different video. But, so all of these guys are pointed out to be Pelasgians. And what I originally heard is that Trojans are Dardanians, but the only one I see being Dardanian is Aeneas. And that makes me think that the Dardanians were actually a people who lived in the north of Troy, and that's actually what it says when you look it up, is that they were people who lived to the land in the north of where Troy would have actually been. And that's why people think that Trojans were Dardanians, because maybe at the time the Dardanians were everywhere and not just up in the north. Maybe the Trojans are actually descended from them, but either way, Dardanians, Trojans, they're all Pelasgians, so they all are, even if their initial kingdom has a different name, like Dardania is one kingdom, Troy is another kingdom, they're both the same ethnic group of people. They're both Pelasgians, and that's interesting that Creative Assembly just decided to name Trojans Pelasgians. That's just, it's really interesting to me, because I always thought Pelasgians were proto-ancient Greeks, but it turns out that Creative Assembly might be thinking that Trojans are Greeks, and there are a lot of theories that the Trojans actually are Greeks, especially because they worship the same gods. They pretty much had the same exact culture, the same exact infrastructure and everything. So they've got to be Greeks. It's probably just a group of Greek people who may be separated from the mainland a long time ago, or maybe they are the same initial Stone Age people who arrived here. They just arrived over here instead of arriving over there. Like, pretend, for example, there's like a Stone Age group coming up from over here, and some of them decide to go over here, but the other ones are like, no, let's try our luck on this piece of land, something like that. So that separation, they are the same people, same DNA, same everything, same ethnic cultural beliefs. They just, one decided to be over here and the other decided to be over here. So that could be really what it is. But then again, these guys are all Achaeans. And Achaeans did rule alongside the Pelasgians, who weren't near as powerful. So, I guess we could say the Pelasgians were more successful over here than they were over here, because ultimately the Achaeans, or the Achaeans, whatever you want to call them, they ended up dominating over here, but they didn't end up dominating over here because that isn't where the Achaeans initially came from or came to. Maybe the Achaeans came into here. So the Pelasgians were probably just more successful. According to Creative Assembly, with them calling them Pelasgians, calling Trojans Pelasgians, they were probably just more successful over here than they were over there. Clearly. Over here they formed Troy, but over there they didn't form much of significance compared to Agamemnon's kingdom and Achilles and Odysseus. So there we go. But there's another thing. All of this is based off of a mythical poem, a mythical story, and there's gods involved in it and everything, getting involved in human affairs, mortal affairs. So it's really all iffy. It's all sketchy. You can't. A lot of people don't want to trust it 100% because of the mythical origin, but I personally have a belief that this is more than just mythical. If it was worth some old guy writing down and taking all his time to write a fantastical poem about it that ended up becoming one of the most popular works in the history of Greece, then, there had to be some kind of reality to it. It's not just purely mythical. Usually the purely mythical stuff is only exploited at the peak of the classical era, when people are really telling stories about literally everything. But Gomer, or Homer is the American pronunciation, Gomer, he grew up in a time, he lived in a time when Greece was just coming out of the Dark Ages. We're not sure where he was born, but he had to be on this campaign map somewhere, born somewhere on this campaign map for sure. And he, back in that time when they were just coming out of the Dark Ages, they didn't really believe that it was that important to tell any stories at all. This was the Archaic period, the beginning of the Archaic period, actually. And it wasn't important to write down a bunch of stories. The important thing was to secure your dominance. That's it. There wasn't any room for high educational focus and high focus on literature and everything like that. That wasn't the number one thing at the time. That's why, we call it the Dark Ages and stuff, because we're just not finding stuff from there. And even the Archaic period, we're not finding a lot of writings from and stuff, not compared to the Classical period for sure. Classical period is way more. And That's what I'm saying. I know what I'm talking about is very controversial, and there's probably going to be a lot of people dissing on me and saying that, oh, what are you talking about? Look at this evidence. Look at that evidence. Yeah, we found this from the archaic period and that from the archaic. It's like, okay, but, compared to the classical period, it pales in comparison. And the only big thing is Gomer's Iliad and the Odyssey. That's the huge thing that comes out of the archaic period that everybody knows. And, it had to be important if he was going to sit there and write about it. It just had to be important. I mean, it had to be something that needed to be passed down, that needed to be told, that he decided to take up the mantle because he knew that this story could never be forgotten. He knew the Bronze Age was in ashes after the Bronze Age collapse. And he knew that, and he was born hundreds of years after it happened, and he just needed to pass it along. And he did. He took it upon himself to write this story and to make it known and make it popular. Because he believed that it needed to be known. And so that means there definitely had to be some truth to it. For sure. There just definitely had to be some truth to it. It had to have really happened. There probably was a Mycenaean invasion, and it probably did happen. It probably actually was part of the Bronze Age collapse, and that's a popular theory, that it was part of the Bronze Age collapse that they came over and scattered Troy, and destroyed Troy and scattered their allies and established Achaean control. But it's strange because right after that, the Achaeans just go away, and they're not there anymore, and it's mostly Aeolians there and Ionians. So it's kind of strange how that whole transition happens, and again, that's why this is a very controversial topic, but I'm going to get into it anyway. So I'm going to start with the campaign with Hector. I know that was a big discussion on this stuff, but I'm ready to get into it now. So just gonna make sure that this stuff is right. It is. Okay, cool. So I'm gonna start a new campaign on Hector, and let's go right into this. I'm super excited.
Are we mere playthings of the gods? Or do we plead divine influence to justify our foolish choices?
He's taken her! He's taken my wife! You've risked the safety of Troy.
Troy is my home now.
You have my oath, brother. She will be returned to you.
Brother, I can fight!
Go. Seek shelter. There'll be plenty of fighting ahead.
The wrath of Achaea will descend upon Troy. Paris acted in love, but he has incited war. Whether the walls of Ilios will endure, only the gods can tell.
So they made Paris look like Orlando Bloom, but they didn't make Hector look like Eric Bana. That's funny. That's interesting. But that appearance of what's her name? Helen? That's actually based off of this one woman historian's appearance of Helen in her documentary. She made Helen appear with all that face paint and exactly that design and everything, and they just took it straight from that and made the game like that. This game definitely needs a little bit of patching up too, and they're definitely going to release a bunch of updates and fixes, so I'm not too worried about that. There's definitely not going to be a big problem with that. But it should be coming up in a little bit. Any minute now. It should just pop right into the grand campaign. And as I'm waiting, I'm going to try to see if I can... Nope.
Paris of Troy must pay! Oh, man-killing Hector. The sons of Achaea will cross the sea with 1,000 ships, not just to take back Helen, but to kill every last Trojan and burn Troy to ash.
Brother, your foolish passion has doomed us.
You rule over the innermost region of Troad, from the city of Zelea. Reckless Prince Paris has taken beautiful Helen to his holdings on the Trojan coast. Reprisals have already begun. An Aeolian incursion has ravaged the south. The raid was launched from Lesbos, but they do not yet fully control the island. To the north, Aeneas holds the Hellespont for Troy.
Fear not, noble cousins. I stand with you.
On the nearby western islands, your god-touched brother Troilos protects the coastal waters in the name of your father, King Priam. You must bring together Troy's disparate forces to counter Achaea's inevitable vengeance.
Alright. Yeah, the Asuwan League, which is the league
The
to
enemy
defend
sends their
Troy.
warriors against you to ravage your lands and sack your cities, but perhaps they underestimate your strength.
Alright. That's enough, old man. So, here we go. Here it is. This is the land of Troy. We are essentially playing as Troy. We're playing as one of the factions of Troy. But the actual faction that controls Troy is Priam. And you can't play as Priam. They're probably going to make it so you can play as him later. They're probably going to release him as DLC or something. They're going to release a lot of DLC for this game, let me tell you. They're probably going to add a lot of factions. They're going to add, like, they should add Menestheus, who was the Trojan hero of Athens in the Trojan War. They should add him. I don't know why they didn't put him in at the beginning. I mean, I guess, you know, Agamemnon, Achilles, and Odysseus, and Menelaus, they were the big ones to put in first, but they definitely have to add Menestheus and let you play as some of the other less popular, but still always will be remembered heroes of the Trojan War. So, just first thing I want to say, this game is gorgeous, unbelievably gorgeous. I mean, look at that little fountain going on there, waterfall, you know, natural fountain, I would say, giant natural fountain, and it's just breathtaking what they've done. It's amazing. A little buggy on the way the screen moves. It's a little stiff, slow at times, like just now, but very amazing game. It's no really big deal with it, just incredible game in general. And now to get into history. So, again, mythical. You know, it's I have to point that out first, otherwise I'm going to get bombed by a bunch of haters. This is all mythical. You know, according to a lot of people. I mean, the Iliad and the Odyssey are mythical tales, but, you know, to me it's just, you know, you can say mythical all you want. I'm going to talk about Troy like it's real. because I believe it was. You know, that Schliemann, the archaeologist, his thoughts are with me. He's in my heart. He's in my heart with that. Troy is real, because I believe it was too. And I'm just gonna go ahead and kick this guy's butt really quick while I talk about the way the Bronze Age would have worked. So,
Prince Hector.
you can see how they have, like, resources up here. So it's not money except for the gold, but gold is not really money. I mean, they get a little taste of money in the Bronze Age, and the reason why they do is because they realize one thing, that gold can't be used for anything else except trading it for other stuff, and that's money right there. So gold can essentially be used for money, but gold is actually very difficult to obtain, and it's rare in the game. As you can see, at the moment I only have 40 compared to like the hundreds, even more than 1,000 as far as food goes that I have of the other resources, but gold is the smallest because it's the hardest to obtain. It's the rarest resource, it says right there, and I'm only making 5 per turn. I'm not making any stone, I gotta fix that, but I'm making 5 per turn only, and certain regions have certain resources, so they would...
As one.
Oops. Well, I just discovered a very large portion of the map by accident. I mean, very large. I just put a hole in the map over here. With my discovery, with my accidental orders to Hector.
Troy endures.
Yeah, whoops. Didn't mean to do that. Why don't you head back over here?
Create a watch rotor.
Yeah, now it's going to take another turn for him to head back over here, and this guy's probably going to attack. Yeah, but Troy, I'm really just using this for the layout. So Troy is situated over here, right at a strategic point, actually in between the we call it today the Gallipoli Peninsula. This strait, and it's the Strait of the Chersonesos right here. And if you go even further, you'll see the Bosphorian Strait is up here, and that leads you straight into the Black Sea, which definitely looks like the Black Sea as you get to the north, because it's all black. Haha. So this is the Bosphorian Strait, and it's interesting how part of this is discovered already. That's pretty interesting. But yeah, this is the Bosporus Strait, and this is the Strait of the Chersonesos, and the Gallipoli Peninsula, as it's called today. Back then it wasn't called Gallipoli. I'm not sure what it was called, actually, but I gotta go back and look at it. It escapes my memory at the moment. But this is where Troy was situated, right at the tip of that peninsula, across from the tip of it, at this strategic point that basically controls all trade that goes through here. I mean, everyone that passes through here has to converse with Troy. So Troy is wealthy, super wealthy, and the ancient name for Troy during the Bronze Age is Wilusa. And Wilusa was believed to be, it's believed to be a lot of things. Independent, it could be a client state of the Hittite Empire, which is further to the east over here. It's off the map. It's way over to the east of the Anatolia. So, like, if I go all the way, wow, you can go far. If I go all the way over here, like, this would have been part of the Hittite Empire. This segment over here would have been part of the Hittite Empire. So it's like way over here. It's like this was the far western edge of the Hittite Empire. Was actually, I think all of this would have belonged. Yeah, it would have been. So the border would have been probably somewhere like right here. Like if you look at this mini map, like right there on the marker would have been the border. Like, no, it would have been to the right. Yeah. Like right here would have been the border of the Hittite Empire. I wonder if you walk all the way over here if you can see something. Probably not, though. They probably didn't put any factions over there. But, yeah, because you can see the faction borders abruptly end once you reach this segment. You can see the line that goes, like, right here. That's the edge of the walkable map. Everything else is just to make it look real and make it look like it's not just the edge of the map right there. But yeah, that's where the Hittite Empire would have been, and they could have been a client state of the Hittite Empire. They could have been independent. Nobody really knows, you know. I mean, like, were you there? No, so you don't know. So that's where we are with that right now. There's not a lot of information. There's not, well, I don't want to say not any. There's the Iliad and the Odyssey, but that's it. You know, there's not a lot of information about, you know, who could have been the ally of Troy and what Troy could have been, if it was actually called Troy or if it was not called Troy, if it was just Gomer who called it Troy. So there's a lot of, like, mystery surrounding this area. But it is a very strategic area, and it is very possible that my theory is true about how part of him went this way, the other part went that way, and this part was just a lot more successful. I mean, it's definitely plausible. Could be very true, that theory. But again, we don't know. That's pretty much the best we can do with this. But what we do know is that, so in the story, Hector fights in the Trojan War, and Hector is the biggest, baddest warrior there is. And then there's also his brother, Paris, and his cousin, Aeneas, up here. Now, Aeneas doesn't really do much in the Trojan War compared to Paris and Hector, who are, like, at more of the center of the stage. And Aeneas really, his fame really kicks in after the war, when Troy is burning to the ground and it's all over, and he leads famously all the Trojans to Carthage, all the way down that way. You can't see it on the map. In fact, I need to find if there's a strategic view on here. It's one of those things that I need to discover. Is there a strategic view of the map? Besides the... There has to be something. Besides diplomacy, which is the obvious one. I mean, I guess there's not, or I can't find it, but it's off the map, Carthage, but Carthage in northern Africa. So he leads his men all the way over to Carthage, all the remaining Trojans, and then he Dido, Queen Dido of Carthage, falls in love with him, and whenever Zeus tells him he has to leave and keep going, she gets really upset and she curses him that whatever nation he creates in Italy will always be an enemy of Carthage and stuff forever, and he goes up north to Italy, and then he colonizes Italy, and he defeats the native Latin people and creates Alba Longa, and Alba Longa goes on to create these two brothers, Romulus and Remus, and they found Rome. So that's Aeneas' fame up here, and we can probably see him standing up here somewhere. I think he's like up here. Where is he? I thought you could see him. We just saw him. He was in the video, and he said, "Do not worry, cousins, I stand with you." He was just up here. I guess you can't see heroes who are not yours unless they're within your immediate view. But yeah, that's Aeneas. And Hector dies at the hands of Achilles. And his people, so to speak, the people that he has ruled over, they essentially, I guess they fall. It could be possible that they stayed. It could be possible that there were still Trojans descended from Hector all the way up until the time when the kingdom of Pergamon under the Attila dynasty ruled this place. I mean, we don't really know what happens to the people that Hector ruled, or if Hector even ruled a portion of the kingdom like this game suggests, although it is very possible. I mean, this game's layout is a very plausible theory that this is how it could have been. It could have been like Trojan princes had their own pieces of the kingdom, and then Priam actually ruled Troy, and they would like have their own people that they rule over and gather allies and stuff if there needed to be a fight that them alone, the Trojan army alone, couldn't handle. And that would mean that the Trojan army was actually personalized. Not so much standardized, but personalized. As in, Hector would have created his own style of fighting, as in this game, and Paris would have created his own style of fighting, and Aeneas would have created his own style of fighting. So it's very plausible what this game is laid out. It's definitely, it could have definitely been this way, for sure. And then Priam himself would have created his own style for the actual defenders of the city of Troy. Or it could have been just this and all these were allies. You know, it could have been anything, really. But this is far more possible, because I highly doubt that if Troy had so much power that they would confine themselves to just being here. I doubt that. I really think they would have exacted their rule over all these other peoples around here. So, for sure. And as the man mentioned as we were going into the campaign, that there was like an Aeolian invasion, or an Ionian invasion of the land coming from the south, and these guys must be one of those invaders, and that's why you've got to take them out and take the city back. So you have to supposedly deal with that before the impending doom coming from the west that we all know of. So here is all of that, and other princes ruling the islands out at sea, like Troilus. That's such a cool name. Troilus is over here. That is just such a cool name. You're practically named after the city of Troy. It's like Hector, Paris. Paris, your city would come much later, but but Troilus, that's like, I'm the man. I should be the man, you know? I should be the one who dies at the hands of Achilles. But, so here we are. Resources. Instead of just using money to pay for anything that you need. Because in the Bronze Age there were no coins. And if we go into a faction summary, we can see Hector in all his glory standing right there. We can see resource counts and everything like that. And again, gold being the rarest. And this beautiful art that they've placed everywhere. This is actually the classical Greece's telling of what happened at this time, because red figure art and red figure pottery came around towards the classical period. Not at this time, not at all. This time would have its own form of art that was very colorful in its own right. Don't get me wrong. Bronze Age art is definitely an amazing thing to check out and see, and you should definitely look up some examples. It's very, very appealing to the eye. And so the terrain around here, and the peoples that would have lived along not just Troy, but here's the strategic view. You just zoom out. Well, I feel like an idiot now. But all of this would have been extremely diverse. Sarpedon is ruling over a Walusian-related tribe, and again, I'm going to go over that interesting name we saw earlier. And there's not Walusian, or it is Walusian, and this is, wait, Waluian, I think, and this is Walusa. Yeah, I got those mixed up for a second, but all of these people would have been very diverse, and their cultures would have been interacting with each other constantly, basically trading resources with each other and trying to make their situation best as possible. But there was no unified kingdom ruling over this entire area. Many of these peoples would either be allies or even clients of the Hittite Empire, actually, especially down here. The one thing we're not sure of is if Troy itself was an ally or a client state of the Hittites, and it's possible that they were, but then here's the question. If they were an ally or a client, why didn't the Hittite army come to the aid of Troy when Troy was attacked by the Mycenaeans? Now, an easy way to get away with that would be to say that, well, this happened during the Bronze Age collapse, so the Hittite army proper had its own problems, like the sea peoples coming in from everywhere, and they couldn't support Troy because they were in zero position to support Troy. It's the Bronze Age collapse. No one's in a position to help anyone. So that's definitely an explanation. But yes, these peoples would have been very diverse, and they would have been very, very thriving and very uninterrupted, besides the small conflicts that they could have had amongst each other, and besides the fact that the Hittite Empire would have come over to take over, but once everything settled down, it would have been relatively peaceful, and these tribes would have been relatively undisturbed by any major, massive conflicts up until the Bronze Age collapse happens, of course. And undisturbed by any major events, I'd say. And so the way they start off with Troy is very, very, very interesting to me, and I myself am going to do research on the various peoples that existed around this region and the individual roles that they played regarding events in the area of this in this area during the Bronze Age. So let's get into what warfare would have been like. So again, as I said earlier, could have been personalized, but not so much standardized. Standardization didn't really come around later. In fact, even armies in the classical period, aside from Sparta, were still not standardized. So standardization was just difficult to achieve because of the amount of resources, or the amount of concentration of single resources like dye, I would say, that it would take to actually make standardization possible. The Romans made it possible just because they had a massive empire and they had access to pretty much everything. But Troy could have done it because Troy would have had access to everything through controlling all trade that came through the strait, so they could have standardized, but I still think that the standardization would have been just a little bit weak. Maybe city guard would have been standardized, but just general armed forces being used on campaigns and everything, they wouldn't have been so much standardized. Now, I moved Hector all the way over here by accident, so now this guy's probably going to come over here and attempt to whoop me, and so for that reason I'm just going to go over all the buildings and conclude the video with an overlay of what types of buildings and the types of worship that would have existed. So, starting with buildings, there's special military administration in the temple. So, special is just like unique to the faction, like unique to the people of the faction. There's Priam's residence, and there's the Trojan Tower, which provides a garrison to defend the city. That actually already exists here. And then there's military buildings, which is like recruitment, and also special lighthouses to warn and to warn soldiers of incoming enemies, and to increase visibility of enemy armies in and around the area of a certain town and its region. So, and this would have been administration, various things like a crier square where people can gather and discuss prominent issues, and food warehouse, obvious to store food, lumber warehouse, again obvious to store lumber, and a vineyard to just have wine and make people happy by being able to host more parties with wine. And the chieftain's hall is to basically have more control as far as a cultural influence over a certain province, and the mud brick houses are to improve the quality of life and the capacity of life, mostly for people in a certain region. So when you take a look at the culture, you see the Aeolians are starting to have a little bit of influence on our area, and therefore Pelasgian influence is going down. And that is because of the Aeolian invasion that's happening. So this is a very realistic thing that would have been going on. When they invade and they conquer a town like that and actually occupy it, they're bringing settlers, they're bringing people, they're bringing culture over here. So that definitely would have had effects. So people doing that in the Bronze Age would have had those sort of effects on the area. That is absolutely correct. And we go into temples. So temples of all the various gods. Here you get into Greek mythology and the nuts and bolts of it. So there's the altar of Zeus, Hera, Ares, my personal favorite, Apollo, Athena, Poseidon, and Aphrodite. And each temple has its own effects. Like this obviously increases casualty replenishment, happiness, and all sorts of things like that. So casualty replenishment, so it's like medical. Interesting, I guess, because love is care. It's all the same. Aphrodite is the Greek goddess of love. And Poseidon obviously has something to do with the sea, I would hope. It says campaign movement rage. Right, because Poseidon's also the god of horses, as well as being the god of the seas. And Athena's gonna have to do with priestesses and melee defense, right? So knowledge, more cultural flourishing and knowledge, and also better melee defense because of tactical improvements. She's the goddess of wisdom and battle strategy. And then we've got Apollo, the god of basically knowledge and music and light and poetry and all that sort of stuff. Like poetry and, the arts, I would say. So again, priestesses and the favor of Apollo. You get the favor of any god, though. Less recruitment cost of all missile units, and less recruitment cost of all agents, so bringing down the costs. Interesting. Shouldn't that be Hermes? And Hermes is actually missing from here. So I guess they decided to give Apollo Hermes's works. And actually, Hades is missing from here too. Hades, but he's also... He would not have it. I understand why he's missing. He would not have a temple. He would not be worshipped at all because people actually tried to stay away from the idea of him, since he was the god of the underworld, the god of death, essentially, the god of the land of the dead. And Ares, god of war, so there's like... So, more expensive units, but units that know how to fight way better for Ares. And then Zeus, it's all about having influence and having less construction costs. And then Hera, it's all about morale, it seems to be. Morale and growth. So, they each have their own perks according to the cultural beliefs of the ancient Greeks and the Pelasgians, as we see here. And then each smaller town, so this is a major city up here, but each smaller town has a unique slot that replaces temples, and it is resources. And this is like various things like arable land, providing food, again, providing food, grain carts, again, marble squares, provides plus 5% to all resources, and influence bonus and more food per turn for a small apoikia, and a hunter's lodge for additional food per turn, but it does reduce growth, probably because of hunting and the fact that people can't be in a region if people are going to hunt more, because if people move in, then the animals are going to move out. So there has to be more nature for hunting to occur. Makes sense. So all of those things are basically how a Bronze Age civilization would function, and Creative Assembly definitely got all that stuff spot on. But my theory, ultimately, as I bring this video to a close, is that the Trojans and the Greeks are the same. Really, they're the same people, but they're the same people. It's kind of complicated because they're the same people, but they're also not. Because the Greeks have had so many other people throughout their timeline who have come over and established civilizations who all claim to have the same lineage in a way, but really don't. I mean, they claim to be from, Achilles, for example, but in reality they may not really be from the same people who were there before. And Trojans are like the original batch. They never changed until they were destroyed and forced out, and then somebody else came in to replace their existence in the same place. That would be true unless it really did work this way and Hector did really rule his own people and those people actually did stay and they weren't completely slaughtered by the Achaeans. Then I stand to be corrected, and they would have actually mixed in with later people who came in, but the original people were definitely more successful, because they built Troy and they were the builders of Troy, whereas the Pelasgians over here just lived among the land that was controlled by these other kingdoms. Here, let me get rid of this city thing. Yeah. So the Pelasgians over here just lived among the kingdom that was built by Agamemnon, but they weren't the actual rulers the Achaeans were. So that's my theory, and again, it's very possible that it did work this way and each prince have their own land, and it's a very interesting idea to develop. So again, I love this game. I'm going to have an amazing time playing the campaign of Hector, and as always, have an amazing time, praise Troy, and stay safe out there, you Phil Hellenes. The Ancient Greek is out.